On September 9, 2025, the world was stunned. An ordinary day shattered by extraordinary events that no one could have predicted. Newsrooms across the globe scrambled to make sense of the breaking headlines, as people everywhere paused, glued to their screens, trying to process the unthinkable. Israel launched an airstrike not in a war zone, but in Doha, the gleaming capital of Qatar. The city, known for its futuristic skyline and reputation as a hub of diplomacy, was suddenly thrust into the center of a geopolitical storm. Fighter jets roared over the city, leaving residents and visitors alike in disbelief and fear. The target was Hamas's top leadership, who had long found refuge in Qatar. For years, Qatar has played a unique role, hosting peace talks, mediating between Israel and Hamas, and offering a rare neutral ground for dialogue. This attack struck at the very heart of those efforts, sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles. The world's diplomats scrambled to respond, as embassies issued urgent advisories and security was tightened across the city. International news outlets broadcast live from Doha, their anchors struggling to convey the gravity of the situation as details emerged by the minute. This bold move shattered diplomatic norms, raising urgent questions about international law and the future of Middle East peace. The strike was not just a military action, it was a direct challenge to the unwritten rules that have governed international relations for decades. Qatar, once a symbol of stability and negotiation, suddenly became a battlefield. The streets that had hosted countless peace talks were now scarred by violence, and the Qatari flag flew at half-mast in mourning for the lives lost and the peace that was shattered. The attack jeopardized the only channel for dialogue, threatening the fragile trust that underpinned hostage talks and ceasefire efforts. Negotiators who had spent months, even years, building relationships, now found themselves facing closed doors and broken promises. For families of hostages in Gaza, hope for their loved ones' safe return was dealt a devastating blow. The uncertainty and fear grew heavier, as the possibility of a negotiated release seemed to slip further away with every passing hour. Humanitarian organizations, too, were thrown into turmoil. Aid workers worried about access and safety, as the fragile networks that allowed them to help civilians in need were suddenly at risk of collapse. Diplomats saw months of work unravel in an instant as the peace process plunged into chaos. Frustration and disbelief echoed through the halls of power, as urgent phone calls and emergency meetings replaced the careful, patient negotiations of the past. The world now watches anxiously. Can diplomacy survive, or will the region spiral into uncontrollable conflict? Leaders from every corner of the globe weighed in, calling for restraint, but uncertainty hung heavy in the air. This strike marks a dangerous new chapter, with consequences that reach far beyond Qatar's borders. The entire Middle East now faces a moment of reckoning, as old alliances are tested and new risks emerge. The future of peacemaking in the Middle East has never looked more uncertain. As the dust settles over Doha, the world is left to wonder, can hope and dialogue survive, or has a line been crossed from which there is no return? On the morning of September 9th, powerful explosions rocked central Doha, targeting a building known to house Hamas members. Reports suggest Israel used advanced, radar-evading missiles launched from outside Qatari airspace. The strike came as Hamas was reviewing a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal, timing that fueled speculation Israel aimed to derail diplomacy. Qatari officials were notified by the U.S. only after the attack, contradicting White House claims and straining U.S.-Qatar relations. The physical damage was limited, but the diplomatic fallout was immense. Doha's reputation as a safe haven for peace talks was shattered in seconds. The world is still grappling with the shockwaves from that single, calculated strike. Israel's objective was unambiguous. Its leadership had set its sights on a decisive blow that would cripple Hamas's ability to negotiate and operate abroad. The mission, to eliminate Hamas's top negotiators in Doha, the very individuals believed to be orchestrating the group's international strategy and maintaining its lifeline to the outside world. But when the operation unfolded, the main targets were nowhere to be found. The carefully planned strike missed its intended mark, leaving the negotiation table empty and the masterminds untouched. Instead, the attack claimed the lives of 5 lower-ranking Hamas members, individuals with far less influence, and a Qatari security official who was simply performing his duty. The death of a Qatari citizen on home soil sent shockwaves through the nation, transforming what was meant to be a targeted operation into a source of national grief and outrage. Families mourned, and the Qatari flag flew at half-mast as the country grappled with the loss. The incident laid bare the immense risks of conducting military actions within diplomatic zones, where the line between combatant and civilian is dangerously thin. It also raised urgent questions about the quality and reliability of the intelligence that guided the strike, casting doubt on the decision-making process behind such high-stakes operations. For Qatar, the attack was more than a breach of security. It was a violation of trust and national sovereignty. What began as a political crisis quickly became a deeply personal tragedy for many, as the nation united in mourning and anger. On the world stage, the operation was swiftly condemned. International observers labeled it both a tactical failure and a diplomatic disaster, warning that such actions could further destabilize an already volatile region. Protests erupted outside embassies and heated debates broke out among diplomats and analysts. Meanwhile, Hamas's leadership emerged unscathed, their resolve only strengthened by the failed attempt. They appeared at press conferences more defiant than ever, using the incident to rally support and reinforce their narrative of resistance. Around the world, people mourned the unintended victims, innocent lives lost in the crossfire of geopolitical ambitions. The gap between military intent and human cost became painfully clear as communities gathered to honor the dead and demand accountability. In the aftermath, the fallout has only deepened the region's divisions, fueling anger, suspicion, and a sense of injustice that may linger for years to come. Qatar has long been a rare bridge in the Middle East, mediating between the West and groups like Hamas. Its capital, Doha, became the epicenter for sensitive negotiations, including hostage releases. By hosting Hamas's political office, Qatar enabled indirect talks that would otherwise be impossible. The Israeli airstrike shattered this foundation of trust, with Qatar's prime minister condemning the attack as state terrorism. The future of Qatar's mediation is now in doubt, and the risks for other would-be peacemakers have never been clearer. The attack sends a chilling message. Even mediators are not safe. The region's fragile diplomatic architecture may never recover. The world responded to the Doha strike with swift and unified condemnation, as governments and international organizations scrambled to address the fallout. The attack sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, prompting urgent meetings and emergency sessions at the United Nations. Leaders from every continent voiced their alarm, emphasizing the gravity of the situation and the potential for far-reaching consequences. The European Union, in particular, took a strong stance, calling for immediate sanctions and the suspension of trade agreements with Israel. This move signaled a significant and unprecedented rift between Israel and one of its key economic partners. European leaders warned that continued aggression would only deepen Israel's isolation and damage its long-term interests. In London, the UK Prime Minister joined other Western leaders in demanding restraint and urging all parties to avoid further escalation. Meanwhile, Russia, Japan, and Turkey issued stern warnings about the risk of spiraling instability, cautioning that the conflict could easily spread beyond the region and threaten global security. Across the Middle East, the reaction was even more intense. Egypt and the Palestinian Liberation Organization accused Israel of deliberately sabotaging peace efforts and inflicting greater suffering on the region's most vulnerable populations. Their statements reflected deep frustration and anger, as hopes for a diplomatic solution seemed to fade. The Arab world quickly rallied in solidarity with Qatar, organizing rallies and issuing joint statements that condemned the attack in the strongest terms. This show of unity amplified Israel's diplomatic isolation, as Arab nations called for coordinated action and increased support for Qatar. Even Israel's closest allies, including the United States, expressed deep concern and questioned the wisdom of the strike. For many, this marked a rare moment of near-universal consensus against such unilateral military action, highlighting the seriousness of the global backlash. As a result, Israel's international standing has suffered a significant blow. The government now faces mounting pressure from both friends and adversaries to reconsider its approach and seek a path toward de-escalation. The diplomatic cost of the Doha strike is proving to be extremely high, with the risk of further isolation looming large. Israel finds itself increasingly alone on the world stage as former allies distance themselves and international forums grow colder. Now, the world watches and waits to see how Israel will respond to this unprecedented backlash. The next steps taken by its leaders could determine not only the future of its foreign relations, but also the stability of the entire region. The United States, Israel's closest ally, publicly distanced itself from the Doha strike. President Trump expressed clear disapproval, emphasizing the U.S. was not involved and did not support the action. The White House called the strike counterproductive, highlighting a sharp divide in strategy. Disputes over whether Qatar was warned have strained U.S.-Qatar relations further. The U.S. now faces the challenge of repairing ties with both Qatar and Israel, as trust erodes on all sides. The path to peace has grown even more complicated for American diplomats. Despite global outrage, Israeli officials remain defiant. They insist Hamas leaders are legitimate targets no matter where they hide. Israel's ambassador to the U.S. warned, "If we didn't get them this time, we'll get them next time." The message is clear. Israel's campaign against Hamas will continue, even beyond its borders. Domestically, the government's tough stance is meant to reassure a public demanding action. Defense Minister Katz threatened further escalation in Gaza if hostages aren't released. The strike in Qatar signals a new, more aggressive phase in Israel's strategy. The Doha airstrike has shattered hopes for a negotiated hostage release. Talks mediated by Qatar and backed by the U.S. are now in ruins, with Hamas declaring the process void. Hostage families are gripped by fear, believing the last chance for their loved one's safe return is gone. Hamas accuses Israel of sabotaging peace, while trust between all parties has collapsed. The neutral space for talks has vanished, and compromise seems impossible. The focus has shifted from diplomacy to confrontation, with hostages caught in the crossfire. The prospects for reviving negotiations are bleak. The region faces a return to violence and uncertainty. The Israeli strike in Qatar marks a dangerous turning point for the Middle East. By attacking a neutral mediator, Israel has upended the rules of international diplomacy. The precedent discourages other nations from hosting peace talks, making future negotiations far riskier. The Abraham Accords and years of diplomatic progress are now at risk of unraveling. Regional alliances may shift, isolating Israel and empowering hardliners. The attack has pushed the region closer to wider conflict, with fewer diplomatic off-ramps remaining. Restoring trust and rebuilding a path to peace will be a monumental challenge. The consequences of this single event will echo for years to come.